We are not sorry about we have offered for our religion, and we have sacrificed, and we are still ready for more sacrifices till the victory of Islam. La ilaha illallah! La ilaha illallah! La ilaha illallah! Real Islamic front and the real Islamic opposition against Zionism. We are here. The real Islamic front against Zionism, communism, and imperialism. La ilaha illallah! La ilaha illallah! La ilaha illallah! La ilaha illallah! And now, as an answer to the second question, why did they bring us here? They bring us here for two reasons. First, in a trial to abort the expanding Islamic movement, which threatens these dishonest Asian Arab regimes. La ilaha illallah! By the stupid agent Anwar Sadat. دم المسلم مش قربان. دم المسلم مش قربان. لليهود والامريكان. لليهود والامريكان. دم المسلم مش قربان. دم المسلم مش قربان. لليهود والامريكان. لليهود والامريكان. القصاص لدم خالد. القصاص لدم خالد. القصاص لدم خالد. القصاص لدم خالد. We have suffered in these past 14 months the severest forms of humiliation and torture in the dirty Egyptian jails, in the horrible prison of al-Qamari, and the prison of Tora, and the prison of al-Istiqbal, and the prison of al-Marj, where we suffered the severest inhuman treatment. There, they kicked us, they beated us, they whipped us with the electric cables, they shocked us with electricity. They shocked us with electricity, and they used the wild dogs, and they hanged us over the edges of the doors with our hand tied at the back. They arrested the wives, the mothers, the fathers, the sisters, and the sons in a trial to put a psychological press over these innocent prisoners. Khaybar, Khaybar, ya Yahud! Khaybar!
Almost immediately after Anwar Sadat's assassination, the Mahibath Amin al-Dawla, or in English, the State Security Investigation Services of Egypt, arrested hundreds of members of Egypt's most radical Islamic sects, the Tanzim al-Jihad and Gamma Islamiyya. The leaders of both groups, such as Muhammad Abin al-Salam Faraj, Essam al-Qamari, and Omar Abdul Rahman. Some of those arrests came at other physical and mental torture sessions. On October 15, 1981, Egyptian doctor and member of the Tanzim al-Jihad and a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, Ayman al-Zawahiri, was brought before the more brutish officers at the time. With a lone interviewer ashen with the past year's events that plagued Cairo and the southern districts of Egypt with Islamist violence, he was left to question Zawahiri. The SSI had reason to interrogate al-Zawahiri. They discovered after arresting him that he was in contact with a number of officers from the Egyptian armed forces. One of his contacts was Essam al-Qamari, a decorated tank commander and major in the Egyptian army. Al-Qamari, it was found out, was at one time a disciple of the late Egyptian scholar and militant Sayyid Qutb. Al-Qamari had smuggled weapons and ammunition from army strongholds for the al-Jihad in the operation of the assassination of Sadat. Zawahiri was battered, with many held over vigorous torture sessions, some that would last 20 minutes, others that would last 2 hours. Nevertheless, under pain of death, al-Zawahiri finally broke. He agreed to lead the SSI to the whereabouts of al-Qamari, and he would be forced to meet him at a designated place where al-Qamari prayed, where he was arrested during Salat. 2 days after the assassination of Sadat, members of Tanzim al-Jihad had begun an insurrection in Upper Egypt. Rebels took control of the city for a few days before paratroopers from Cairo intervened and took control of the district, in which 68 policemen and soldiers were killed in the fighting. Immediately after the arrest, Egyptian authorities arrested en masse hundreds of others who were suspected of being members of the al-Jihad. The crackdown of those within the religious sector in Egypt were ordered by Egypt's new president, Hosni Mubarak, who was injured in Sadat's assassination. The main antagonist and planner of Sadat's assassination was arrested in these crackdowns, Khalid Islambouli. Islambouli was a captain in the Egyptian army, as well as Staff Officer 3 in a brigade headquarters. Meanwhile, al-Zawahiri was taken from the Tora prison to the higher military court to give testimony against other jihadi members from the army. Under these conditions, he admitted that they formed a movement inside the army to topple the regime and institute an Islamic government. During questioning made from the higher state security services, al-Zawahiri made the following statement. After assassinating the president of the republic and delivering a statement on the radio, Abd al-Zamar also gave some explosives on October 12, 1981 to hold on to. My relationship with Zamar started after the assassination on October 6, 1981, when I visited him at 10 o'clock. In the department in Harani, where he was hiding, I went there with Essam al-Damiri and Sayyid Imam Abdel Aziz in the latter's car. Abdel Aziz and I stayed in the car while Damiri went to his apartment and brought him to meet us. I had a discussion with Zamar on two issues. First, I told him that the assassination was enough, that he should not develop it into a full-scale battle with the government. Second, I asked him if he knew a major at the army called Essam al-Qamari and whether an officer called Gamma al-Rashid was one of the people who implemented the assassination. Islambouli, the lead assassin, told members of the court his reason for Sadat's assassination. It was rather quite simple. The Egyptian government was to be replaced with an Islamic rule of law, a governing body led by the ulema, a body of Muslim scholars led by Sharia law. Muhammad Abd al-Salam Faraj was another leading figure in Sadat's assassination. When the SSI searched his home, they found many incriminating items, which included a document entitled Al-Farida al-Ghaiba, the neglected duty, in which Faraj wrote himself. The work showed the evolution of the radical Islamist ideas since Qutb's Islamic Manifesto milestones. While Qutb felt that jihad was a proclamation of the liberation for humanity, Faraj maintained with absolute certainty that jihad would enable Muslims to rule the world and to reestablish the caliphate. Faraj showed no hesitation when asked about Sadat's assassination. He recalled it a spiritual duty to assassinate him, not for his stance with Israel in the West. Simply, it was to institute Egypt as a nation governed by Islamic law. The trial saw international attention in Tora prison. Ayman al-Zawahiri was designated the de facto authoritarian to speak on behalf of the group. Al-Zawahiri can be seen proclaiming loudly the treatment of the jailed super suspects and asked the media to investigate why the secular authorities were torturing and arresting family members of the detainees, all whom were religious Muslims. In one instance, al-Zawahiri would declare loudly behind the prison cages located in the courtroom with dozens of cameras all pointing in his direction. Who are we? Who are we? We are Muslims. We are Muslims who believe in their religion. We are Muslims who believe in their religion, both in ideology and practice, and hence we tried our best to establish an Islamic state and an Islamic society. Meanwhile, many of those arrested began to speak in hushed tones about the leadership of Gamma Islamiyya, whether the more respected Rafai Taha should lead or Omar Abdel Rahman. Some had thought that due to Rahman's disability, which was blindness, he should not lead the group. One of the strongest opponents of Abdel Rahman's leadership was Essam al-Qamari, followed by Ayman al-Zawahiri, as well as others. Taha would later state to the closest confidants in the prison that al-Zawahiri was fanning the fire of dissension by encouraging Essam al-Qamari to argue against Abdel Rahman's leadership. However, the toll of the torture in which al-Zawahiri suffered, as well as his most heavily weighted crime, informing on his close friend Essam al-Qamari, left the venerable doctor with a sense of quenching revenge. The trial ended, and on April 15, 1982, Faraj, Islambuli, and 3 other suspects were executed by hanging. Omar Abdel Rahman, who did not have excess torture due to his blindness, was released and expelled from Egypt in 1984. Rahman would lead members of the Al-Faruq Mosque in Brooklyn, New York, which was behind the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, and for being involved in the landmarks plot, which did not materialize. Ayman al-Zawahiri was released from Tora prison in 1984. He would still have theological differences between himself and Rahman. Al-Zawahiri had other plans, however, and he would relocate to Peshawar, Pakistan. There he would meet with the notable theologian Abdullah Azam. Both men would create an operational center for mujahideen who would come worldwide for their fight against the Soviets in Afghanistan. In the same year, al-Zawahiri would come into contact with a young Eater Saudi, Osama bin Laden. Other Egyptian militants who were expelled began to relocate with al-Zawahiri. It was here this faction would be renamed the Egyptian Islamic Jihad. One of those who joined the doctor in the Egyptian Islamic Jihad was Sayyid Imam al-Sharif, nicknamed Dr. Fadl. Al-Sharif was one of al-Zawahiri's oldest and most entrusted associates dating back to the early 1970s. Al-Sharif would become one of the primary instigators to Islamic militancy and would write a book, The Essentials of Making Ready for Jihad, which was used as a jihad manual in al-Qaeda training camps in Afghanistan. Azam and al-Zawahiri would have disparaging and often heated arguments regarding how the funding of the Maktab al-Khidmat office would be dispensed after the war would end. Leaders of the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, especially al-Zawahiri, wanted to use their well-trained warriors to overthrow the Egyptian government. Azam longed to turn the attention of the Arab Mujahideen to Palestine. The division of goals separated the two men from each other. However, al-Sharif agreed with the Egyptian Islamic Jihad and al-Zawahiri that the jihad should continue on, only this time not in Egypt, but against the Americans. In 1989, with the war ending and the Soviets retreating, Azam and his son would be assassinated by a car bomb. No one was ever arrested for his murder. The following years, which preceded the Soviet-Afghan War, would begin the revenge Ayman al-Zawahiri once stated to Faraj in Tora prison would begin. In 1998, the World Islamic Front, for which al-Zawahiri and Osama bin Laden were headed members of, declared their intention for the West. We issue the following fatwa to all Muslims. The ruling to kill the Americans and their allies, civilians and military, is an individual duty for every Muslim who can do it in any country in which it is possible to do it, in order to liberate the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Holy Mosque from their grip, and in order for their armies to move out of all the lands of Islam, defeated and unable to threaten any Muslim country in the near future. This is in accordance with the words of Almighty Allah, and fight the pagans altogether as they fight you altogether, and fight them until there is no more tumult or oppression, and there prevail justice and faith in Allah.